All right, in this video, we're going to talk about CompTIA exam strategies. These strategies are going to be for the day you take your test. So that's the focus, and so let's get started. All right. So to start off, there's two ways to register for a CompTIA exam right now. There's either a home delivery way of taking the exam, and there is a test center delivery to take this exam. So when you register for your test, you had to choose one of two methods for delivery. Again, it doesn't matter which one you choose. You know, the home delivery is nice because a lot of people are worried about still that's the situation we're in, and they want the convenience of taking it at home. And then others want to venture out into a test center because they like the isolation of it. It's very focused. You know, no distractions. So again, it doesn't matter which one you choose. Just you have to choose one when you register for the test. So let's start by looking at home delivery real quick. Okay, so if you chose to take the exam from home, right, or from some other location other than a test center, there's a video you really want to watch. So I put the link on the video, and I know you can't click on the link on the video, so there's going to be a soft copy of this document, of the document covering everything I'm talking about during this video, that'll have that link on it. Or you could just see it there and just copy that link, into your browser. But there's a very important video that you need to watch before you take the test because it's going to explain all the procedures for taking it at home. So let's go there real quick. So I have it open here on my browser. So let me open this up real quick. So this is the link I posted or pasted there in that my outline there, and this is the online testing for CompTIA, and they're using what is called OnView, which is a Pearson VUE kind of like home delivery system that they're in cahoots with CompTIA. And if you go to the site, you're going to see all kinds of different little links here, but the one I want you to focus on are right here. Performance system test, finding your test space, and getting your ID ready. So each one of these has little links, and it's super important to watch this video and go to the site at least 5 days before you take your test at home. Okay? The reason why it's so important to go to the site early, do not do it on test day. Did y'all hear that? Do not do it on test day because you need to run a test on your computer and on your internet connection to your ISP, and make sure that your computer that you're going to be using to take the test has the horsepower and the connectivity needed to take the test from home. So make sure you run this test here, and I would recommend, again, running it a couple days before. That way you can verify that your computer is up to snuff. If it's not, then you can find an alternate computer or an alternate way to take it. So you need to really run that test a few days before. Another thing is they have the ID requirements here. I'm going to talk about the ID requirements here in a minute. So just hold on tight. The video you're going to watch is down here, this video right here. Make sure you watch this video because, again, it's very informative about what's going to happen during that day of when you are taking the test. And it's really important to have that understanding because there's nothing worse than getting to test day. You spent all of this money on a certification voucher, and now you don't have a computer that can do it, or your environment's not right. So please make sure you watch that video before you take the test. Okay? So there you go. There's the link. So let's talk about a few things here, right? So if you're taking it from home, right? So you're going to have to make sure you have a proper ID. So one of the things about the test when you take it home is they're going to require that you do a quick selfie of yourself. So you're going to do a selfie of yourself, and then you're going to take a picture of your ID, and you're going to send them to Pearson VUE or CompTIA, because you're talking about a CompTIA test, right? And they're going to use those pictures to verify your identification, your ID, right? So you have to send those in a selfie and a text message, right? And they'll direct you during the test. Okay, so you're gonna send it to them. Now, real quick before I forget, if you are under 18, right, it's totally cool because anyone can take a CompTIA test, right? You don't have to be 18 or over. You can do it younger. In fact, when I was a teacher at a high school, I had the youngest person that ever passed the CompTIA test was 14. So you can take it at 14, but a parent does have to be there to show their ID. So if you're taking it home, your parent will have to get on the camera, and she'll have to kind of show their ID on the camera and to verify your ID. So it's very important that your parent is there on the test day at your location. But if you're over 18, you don't need a parent. So you're an adult, right? So let's talk about some what type of IDs are able to be used for this exam. Okay, real quick. So the most popular form of ID is just a good old-fashioned driver's license. So if you have a driver's license, that is your best bet. Even if you're under 18, if you have a driver's license, that is your best form of ID because it has to be some type of like federally given ID, something that's has some official to it, right? A passport is also not, it can be a passport. So if you're in the military, a military ID works, right? Some other kind of nationally identified card. Some states provide ID cards. They're not like they look like driver's license, but they're just ID cards. Again, they are they're recognized as a kind of a state or sometimes state license registration. A green card, right, or a permanent visa card. If you're not an American citizen, totally cool. You can still take the test. And again, if you're a student, you can always use your student ID as long as it has a picture. So the key is a picture ID. Okay. So there we go. So, so again, if you're under 18, make sure you have a parent there to be able to verify your identity, right? The reason why this is important is because in the old days, people used to take other people's tests for them, and that was a big problem for a while. So now they really have to make sure that you are who you say you are, and we understand, right? Just make sure you have a recognizable photo ID. Okay. And on this link here, again, is a link to a web page, and I have it here ready to go. So let me show you real quick. So this link here takes you to this site, and this gives you, this website talks about all the IDs that are required, whether it's online delivery at home or if you go to a test center. So if you go to a test center, which I'm going to talk about next, you're going to need two forms of ID, and we'll cover that in a second. And this little web page here shows you the policies for CompTIA. Now, every testing organization has their requirements. This is CompTIA. Cisco has theirs. Linux has theirs, right? Or Red Hat. But this is the CompTIA page. And again, these are the different IDs that qualify. Now, if you take the test at home, you only need one form of ID. But if you take it at a test center, you need two forms of ID. And I used to tell my students that your second form of ID does not need a picture, but it does need to have a signature. So a credit card with your name on it and a signature. If you take a credit card, make sure you sign the back. If you haven't signed the back of your credit card, that's a really important thing to do. So sign the back. Or it could be some other form of ID, like a student ID, a military ID, something else. So you always want to have two forms of ID, your social security card. That's another good one that you can use as a secondary ID, but the first one has to have a photo, okay, a photo ID, right? And again, if you're under 17, we already talked about it, but you need to take a parent with you. I'll have a parent present for that exam, okay? No problem. All right, so go to this site, and it gives you all the rundown on the proper IDs. You do not want to go and have the wrong ID. Okay, so now let's talk about if you're going to take this test at a test delivery center, a test center, right? Most cities have lots of different test centers there around them. Most colleges have test centers. So if you're looking for a test center to take a CompTIA exam, again, it's a Pearson VUE is the delivery system that they use. They go through Pearson VUE to deliver their exams. So you can find a Pearson VUE test center usually in most towns. If your town doesn't have one, look around, maybe a larger town close by. There's definitely going to be one there. Or just take it at home. Use the online delivery. Well, it can't be any easier, right? So let's talk about test center delivery. Now, this is my rule, right? So let's test day. Let's say you schedule a test for a Saturday morning, which some test centers allow weekends, right? Not all of them do, though, so be aware of that. Some test centers are only Monday through Friday from like 9 to 5, right? Some have after hours, right, all the way to like 9 or 10 at night, and some have weekends, even Saturday and Sunday. So regardless of where you're taking it and when you're taking it, you want to arrive at the test center at least 30 minutes early. Take my advice, because if you're even 1 minute late to that test center, they're going to scratch you out. They're going to keep your money for the voucher. They don't care, and you lost your test day. So make sure they're early. I'm very, very crazy about it. I get there 45 minutes early, only because I like to look around, find the bathrooms, and things like that. Because I'm going to talk about that. That's important, right? So please arrive at least 30 minutes early. When you get to the test center, you're going to check in, right? So there's going to be a proctor there, probably behind a desk of some sort, and you're going to walk in, and they're going to ask you for two forms of ID. Two forms. Now, again, the online delivery, you need one ID, but for the test delivery, you need two, and we already talked about those requirements. My favorite, driver's license and a social security card or credit card or something like that that's signed. Make sure it's signed, okay? Again, for 17 years, if you're 18 or if you're 17 or younger, you're going to have to take a parent with you to the test center so that they can verify your identity with their ID. So again, make sure that if you go to the test center, you have to take your parent with you, and that way they can verify you. Okay, so you must be accompanied by a guardian. Now, again, if you don't have, a guardian could be, someone whoever's taking care of you. So I say parent, but it could be any guardian. Okay? So far, so good. Arrive 30 minutes early. Don't forget. So once you check in with your ID and you verify your ID, the proctor is going to take your picture. They'll take your picture and they're going to make you sign some type of signature pad, right? They're going to want to have, again, a form of your signature that matches on your ID. So your ID and the signature pad have to match, right? And these are, again, all just fail-safes to make sure that someone's not taking someone's certification for them, right? So once they take your picture and you sign the signature pad, they're going to escort you to a place to put your stuff, and it's going to be a locker, some type of locker. So one of the requirements to be a test center is they must have a place to safely keep people's phones and wallets or whatever, purses for young ladies. So they're going to take you to a locker and they're going to lock away your stuff. Now that includes any type of smartwatch or anything that has some type of network or internet connection. They're going to ask you to lock it away, and they're going to lock it in a locker. Okay. Once they lock that away, this proctor hopefully will ask you if you want to have a dry erase board. Now, if they don't ask if you want one, ask them for one, because it's also mandatory that test centers have these dry erase boards available for test takers. So they have to have them. It's a requirement. So ask them for one. And if they're really nice, ask them for two. Have two of them, especially for the more advanced exams. Some of the more entry-level exams, the ITF and stuff like that, you may get only just one whiteboard, but sometimes it's nice to have two, especially for like the security pluses and the network pluses and the higher end cloud certs. Sometimes it's nice to have two because you're going to fill them up. And so anyway, but that's just my advice. At least ask for one. Okay, so make sure you get a dry erase board. Now, for you home takers, people taking it home, the software has a built-in whiteboard tool. So you'll see it in the video that I talked about for the online delivery. There's going to be a whiteboard button. You can use it to write down notes, and we'll talk about why that's important later. Okay. Once you are checked in, you've put your stuff in the locker, you've signed your the pad, you got your picture taken, right, and you got your whiteboard and the dry erase marker. The proctor will escort you to a testing station, and they're going to log you in, right? So, okay, so now you're sitting there, they log you in. Let's go to the next one. Okay. Oh, okay. So now we're going to talk about what you're going to see on the exam. So we're going to go into a little more detail about what you're about to see. So right now, what has happened is they've sat you down and you're sitting there. They've logged you into a station. Okay. Now, everything I'm going to talk about from here on is on another link. There's another link to another video. And if I go there real quick, let me go there real quick. Okay, here we go. It's a really good video that you can watch. So if you watch my video, I'm going to tell you a bunch of stuff and advice. You might want to watch this video like the day before you take the test, just for a reminder. Okay, so I put the link on my little slide here, and it'll take you to this page so you can see this video that I'm using, essentially this video to explain what's going to happen to you. So watch the video if you want to see it again. Is that cool? All right, so there's the link to go to watch that video. You're going to want to watch it right before you take the test. Okay, so here we go. You're sitting at the station. The proctor has logged you in. Rule number 1, make sure your name is on that welcome screen. Now, I know this sounds crazy, but I've seen this before. I had students in the past, when they went in they logged them in, their name was incorrect on the welcome screen, and they were about to take someone else's test. The proctor is logging in. They have to make some choices, and they have to click on some buttons. If they click something wrong, they could possibly log you in or to another person's test. Again, it's pretty rare, but it could happen. So right there where it says candidate's name, make sure that your name is there. Don't take someone else's exam, okay? Then you hit next. When you hit next, you go to the next screen, which is the NDA screen. So this is the non-disclosure agreement screen, right? What it is, and I'm just going to tell you, you can read it. They give you 28 minutes to read this agreement because there's a lot there. It's a very legal agreement. But essentially what it's saying is that you're not going to talk about the contents of the test. You're not going to tell people what you saw. You're not going to divulge any labs or any questions on an exam. So they're just trying to keep people from telling other people what exactly they saw on the test, right? This test is owned by CompTIA or what other organization that you're taking a test there, because Pearson VUE also delivers for Cisco and a bunch of other organizations. So Pearson VUE is really popular with test delivery. CompTIA happens to be one that they do deliver for, and they don't want you to tell people what's on the exam, okay? This is another good some advice. Um, of course, you're not allowed to take anything into the test station, right? I mean, you can't take books or notes. But what you can do is when they give you that whiteboard, right? During this 28 minutes, I would spend that time writing or brain dumping information that you wanted to remember onto that whiteboard uh, before you take the test, right? So you have 28 minutes, and during that time, just write down things on that whiteboard, right? Anything from like formulas to port numbers or how to convert hex or how to convert binary, just anything you want to try to remember. Now, this is Johnny's rule. Don't write too much because you're not going to have time to do a book, but you do have 28 minutes, and if you want to take the entire 28 minutes, that's fine. It's up to you. But watch that clock because there's a clock spinning on the right, which we're going to talk about in a minute, and it's going to be timing down to 28 minutes. And once it gets to 0, the test is going to start automatically. Okay, so just be very aware of that, and we'll talk about that timer in a minute. So this is the time or the opportunity to write those notes. Now, when you're going to have to scroll down onto this agreement, and on the very bottom, there's going to be an agreement button. So agree or don't agree. Well, if you don't agree, the test is over. I mean, there's nothing you can do about it. They need you to agree to this, or they're not going to let you take their test. So what other choice do you have? Click agree. Okay? So once you start the test, once you get through the NDA, the test starts. So let's take a look at some things about the environment that are super important. One of the most important are the navigation arrows. So here on the bottom right are your navigation arrows. Now some tests, like from CompTIA, from Cisco and other organizations, they only allow you to go forward. Right? Cisco is famous for their forward-only tests. Right? You can't go back. Well, CompTIA doesn't do that. They let you go forward and backwards, right? So you can go the question before, the question after, so you can navigate around. But this is Johnny's rule. Don't go too far, right? Let's say you're on question 20 and then you have a question, go, hey, I think I saw something on question 2 that reminds me of that, right? Don't go back. It's going to take you a while to get back there and you're wasting time. The best strategy is what is called flagging, which we're going to talk about later. So if it's 3 or 4 questions back, that's no problem. Or 3 or 4 questions, or when they go forward and back. But try not to go too far back or too far forward because it's going to suck up your time. There's a better strategy. We'll talk about it in a few minutes, right? Now, don't forget, sometimes the answer to some questions are in another question, right? So let's say you have a Wi-Fi question that says, what speed is 82.11a, right? And then there's another question somewhere that gives you the answer to that question, right? But it's just in a different format, right? That's, you'll see that. So if it's not too far back, then go back and answer it. But if it is far back, you're going to want to flag it, but you're going to want to take a note. We'll talk about notes in a few minutes. Okay. Another thing on the screen is your timer and question number. So this is really important. I cannot stress enough. You need to keep track of your time. Oh my God, you need to keep track of it. Now, don't get obsessed by it. Don't freak out, but you need to just be very aware of where you are because it's really strange. When you take a certification test, you enter into a different time continuum. I don't know what it is. I know it sounds crazy, but time and space start going faster, right? Everybody else is in a normal time, but you're in this time continuum and the clock is spinning. It just seems like it's going faster because it's just, you're so into the test that you lose track of time. So it's very important to keep an eye on that time. Know how much time you have left, right? Another thing that's there is the questions, question numbers. Now, notice in this one it says 3 of 7, right? Well, let's say you're taking an IT fundamentals exam. Well, IT fundamentals is 75 questions, right? Or 70 questions. It could be 70 to 75 questions. So you always start with question 1, and then you have 75 questions, right? So when you go to question 2, it says 2 of 75, 3 of 75. Does that make sense? So the first number is increasing, right? How many of 75? Like 10 of 75. So the question number will be the first number. I'm on question 10 of 75, right? So the reason why I'm bringing this up is, let's say that you're taking your IT fundamentals exam and you're on question, I don't know, I'm gonna say, let's say you're on question 30, right? Let me erase that because that is looking pretty dingy there for a minute. Okay, so let's say you're on question 30, right? And you have 20 minutes left on the clock, right? You better kick it into overdrive, right? Because you still have several questions to go and you only have 20 minutes left. So you see what I'm saying? You always want to be aware of your time and what question you are, and you kind of look and think, okay, I've got still this amount of time, right? Now, let me tell you the secret to this test as far as time. The secret to this test, right, is to answer questions you know as quickly as possible, right? So let's say, again, I'm focusing, I've been talking about the ITF, but there's going to be the Network Plus, the Security Plus, the A Plus. It doesn't matter what CompTIA test you're taking, right? There's always a time limit, right? So for the ITF, right, IT fundamentals, they give you 60 minutes. They give you 60 minutes, right? And you have 75 questions. Well, that's less than a minute a question. Does that make sense? Which means if you have a question that's going to take you a while, you're going to want to save it for later, which we'll talk about flagging in a minute. But what I'm trying to get at this point is you want to build time, right? So let's just for fun say that you had 75 questions and 75 minutes of time, which means 1 minute a question, right? Pretty easy math, right? Well, if one of the questions takes you 30 seconds, right? You had a minute, but you only took 30 seconds. The next question, now you have a minute and a half to do that question. And if that question only takes you 30 seconds, the next question you have 2 minutes. If that one only, you know what I'm saying? You're building time. It's important to build time because when you get to the end, I'm going to show you a good strategy is to save the hard questions for last, right? If there's labs on the test, save your labs for last. If anything that's going to take time, labs, very long questions, or questions that you don't know but you're guessing on, take a while. You just take a guess and save them for later. All those take time, and the only way to make more time is to answer other questions quickly, and you start accumulating that time. Does that make sense? So make sure you do that. Accumulate time, answer questions as quickly as possible, and go to the next question. Okay. And again, we'll talk more about that in a minute when we talk about flagging. So the point of this is watch your time. Okay. Now, let's talk about what type of questions you're going to see on this exam, right? So on CompTIA exams, there's many different types of questions, right? Let's talk about first the IT fundamentals. With the IT fundamentals, you only have two types of questions, only two. They're going to be multiple choice, right? Well, I'm sorry, there's no two types of questions. There's one type of question, multiple choice, but the multiple choice will be in two forms, right? The first one is what is called a single choice question, right? So this is a single choice question. And how do I know it's single choice? Is by looking at the buttons on the choices. Notice how they're round. They're round. We call them radio buttons. A radio button means you choose just one answer, right? So there we go. What color is the sky? It's blue. Just one answer, okay? It's a multiple choice question, but it's a single option choice, okay? Again, very important to remember that. There's also the multiple response questions. Notice that these are square. The buttons are not radial, they're square buttons, right? Also notice how it says select two. Now, luckily, they're not going to let you choose more than two, right? Now, you could choose one and hit next, and it'll let you just choose one, right? They'll let you do that to yourself, right? But so you have to be very aware of it. It says choose two, choose two, choose three. Now, if you've chosen two and you want to make a change, you have to unchoose the one that you want to remove and choose the one you want. Does that make sense? So let's say what's this? Which of the following is a primary color, right? So red is a primary color, and let's see, and blue is a primary color, right? So I've chosen those two. But let's just say for fun, instead of choosing blue, let's say I choose, let me go back up here. Let's say I choose gray. I choose gray and red. And I go, oh, wait a minute, gray is not a primary color. And I try to choose blue. Well, that's more than the two, and it's going to go, it's going to give you a little, right? And it's going to say, you can only choose two, right? And you're wasting time. Don't forget you're wasting time. So what you're going to do is you're going to unchoose the blue, the gray, and then choose the blue. Does that make sense? You unchoose one and then choose the right one. Okay? So don't waste your time going, oh, that's right? And make sure you choose the amount they say. If it says two, pick two. It's not going to let you pick more. Okay? Now, other exams like the Network Plus, the Security Plus, the A Plus, they have what are more choices of questions. So on the IT fundamentals, you're only going to see multiple choice, the two types of multiple choice. But on other exams, there's drag and drop. There's exhibit questions where they'll have an exhibit and maybe even a video to watch to answer a question. And of course, the performance-based questions, okay? So these questions are going to require that you do something, right? They're going to start a lab. Now be careful in the performance-based because you lose the timer on the top right of the screen. So your timer goes away because you enter another environment and the timer is now gone. And oh my gosh, that is so bad because you can get really into a lab and lose track of time. So this is my rule. Take it or leave it. Save all labs for last. Just save them for last. I'm going to show you how to do that, right? It's just my advice. Do all your multiple choice first. Get them all out of the way, right? Do your best on them and save that type of stuff for last. Even like the exhibit, I would even save those for last because it takes time to click on something, have it come up and look at it, okay? It's totally up to you. Now, if you see a lab that's really easy, which sometimes happens, there's really easy labs, like, well, I can do that real quick. It's up to you. Totally cool. It's your test. It's your time. Just make sure you get it done as quickly as possible. That timer is always going. Now, another thing, you can't stop the timer. Let's say you have to go to the bathroom. Too bad. You cannot stop it. So this is another Johnny advice. Go to the restroom before you take the test. So when you show up at the test center, again, remember, I get there 45 minutes early for one reason. Find the bathroom, right? I go and find the bathroom, right? If at home, you know where the bathroom is, hopefully at your house, and just go to the restroom. Use the restroom before you start your test because you don't want to have to stop. Now, I have had students in the middle of the test go, I can't do it. I can't wait. I have to go to the restroom. And they have left the test and the proctor will come in, and stop their, not stop them, but just kind of, okay, go to the restroom. And they're losing time and they failed because they ran out of time, didn't have enough time to finish the test. I mean, just don't do that. Okay, so these are the type of questions you'll see on the exam. Okay, now again, the flag button. This is super important. I've kind of already talked about this, but let's talk about this with more detail. So here's your scenario. You're going through the test, you come to a question or a lab that's really extensive, it's very long, or a question that's going to take some time. You can flag it. There's a little flag button. See right there? So this is a question and there's a flag button. You hit the flag button and now you're saving it for another screen called the review screen. Okay, you can flag it. So when should you flag? Well, long questions that you need some time for. Now, can you answer a question and still flag it? Yes, you can. You can take a wild guess at it and then flag it if you want, because then you can answer it later and look at it, maybe save it for later, right? Or something you want another look at. So in other words, when do you flag? You flag when questions are long, if it's a lab you want to save for later, something you guessed on and want to look at again, or just something you just want to feel like flagging it, right? If you flag it, it saves it for what is called the review screen. And we'll talk about that next. Okay, so here we go. This is so important. I'm about to say something super important again. Remember, you have that little white erase board, dry erase board. And for people taking it home, you have the little white erase board utility, a little tool, right? If you flag a question, you need to write down the question number and just a few little words about the question itself. So here's an example. Question 20, programming question. Question 20, Wi-Fi question. Question 20, router question, or some type of question, some blurb about that question. Just something that gives you an idea of what the question's subject was about. Just 2 or 3, 4 words max. Don't make a sentence, just something short. I'll explain why here in the next slide. Here we go. So you've gone through every question, right? So you start the test. Let's say you have a 75 question test from 1 to 75, right? So you started at 1, you start going through the test. You go through the test. You flag questions. You go through it. You get to 75. Now you're done with all the questions and all the ones you flagged. You can go back and forth, but I would just utilize that flag button. When you hit next, you go into the review screen. So let's talk about the review screen. Okay, the review screen is going to show you every single question, and every single question will have a flag. But the difference is the white flags mean that you did not flag it. So white flags, you did not flag it. Blue flags, you did flag it. So if you look down here, I know it's hard to see because it's kind of gray. These flags here are not blue. This is a blue flag. That means you flagged it. But notice how there's no explanation or anything about the question. It just says flag question 3. This is where those little messages you wrote down about the questions helps, because again, sometimes other questions will answer other questions, right? So when you see something, go, oh, I remember that on question 4, and I can write, and on a whiteboard, you write it down real quick. Question 4 was the answer to question 30, or whatever you want to write down, right? So that way, when you go to the review screen, you can go to that question and answer that question with a little bit more like feeling good about it, right? More positive, right? So again, use that dry erase board because it really is going to help you to be more efficient during the review stage, because there's nothing worse than like just clicking on things. What is this question? What is this question? Those little notes are so important. Trust me, I've been doing this a long time, and the students that take my advice usually pass. Okay, so just make sure a little blurb, and then you can go around. Now you can click on any question. Like for instance, even though it's not blue, you can click on it and look at it. Especially if you think there was an answer to a flag question on another question, you want to go look at it. And let's say it has a port number there, and then there's a question asking about a port number. It's easy to get around, but you have to take those notes. Okay. Okay. So once you go through the review, there's going to be a button called the End Review button, so that you finish. Once you hit End Review, you're going to get this screen, which is a little warning screen. It's going to say, are you sure you want to end the review? This is important to remember. Once you say yes, if you say end the review, you're no longer going to be able to see any more questions. All right, so you cannot return to any questions. Do not hit this button till you're ready. Don't hit that button till you're ready when you go through everything. Now, of course, you're watching your clock, always watching your clock because it's ticking away. And if you get to 0 on the clock, no matter where you are, it ends it for you, no matter what, right? There's no way to slow it down. So again, don't hit the end of review button till you're really ready to end the review. Okay? Okay. Let me see. I think I missed a slide. Oh, that's it. Okay. So here we go. Remember the following guidelines. Okay. Keep an eye on your time. Use it wisely. The exam goes fast. If you don't know the answer to a question or you are spending more than 1 minute on a question, you should pick the best answer and then flag that question, write down a note on your whiteboard about that question and move on. Don't forget to write that note. Once you answer all the questions, then you can go to the review screen and go over those questions. So important to use that time or the flags wisely. Okay, and again, don't forget to write something down, like this example here. Question 20, Wi-Fi security. Write up just 2 or 3 words. That's all you have to do. You may also use the next and previous button to go back and forth. I've already said this, don't go too far back, right? Because it just wastes time, right? This takes time for searching. Use the flag button. It's more strategic, right? And just write a note down on your whiteboard. Now, another suggestion that I used to tell my students is because I have a lot of students that were dyslexic or had reading disabilities, and I suffer from some severe reading disabilities. It's always a good idea, for those of you this helps, to put your finger on the screen when you read the question. It is so important to read the entire question. Now, here's a problem I've seen with students in the past. They'll read the first couple of sentences, think they know what the question is saying, and then answer it. And later in the question, there was a not statement, which is not the right answer, or instead of what is the right answer. Does that make sense? Because CompTIA is famous for a couple of things. They're famous for ambiguous questions, confusing questions, questions that have those the double negatives and the not statements on them. CompTIA, I could go on and on about the problems with CompTIA. It's a lot of detail you have to know, which is ridiculous, right? Because most people, don't need it in the real world. But that's just the nature of the beast with CompTIA. So again, I used to tell my students, put your finger on the screen and read the question with your fingers so you read the whole question. Read the whole question, right? Don't waste time switching your answers, right? If you're 100% sure about the answer, if you're not 100% sure about the answer, the best practice is stick with your first response. Now, I know I'm going kind of quick because I don't want to want this video too long, but there's a lot of test strategies. Penn State has a beautiful website page of test strategies that you can go to check out Penn State's website. But every teacher will say this. When you answer a question, usually your gut is right. Your first gut response is usually right. It's the people that change their answers usually are changing them to wrong answers. So, if you're not 100% sure about an answer, but you guessed and you feel pretty good about that guess, leave it alone. You're probably right, okay? Okay, read each question carefully. There's not words inside there, what is not the correct answer. And again, don't forget about the round and square buttons. Round means single answer, square means multiple answers, 2 or 3, whatever it is, okay? Okay, remember CompTIA, okay, here's another really important part. CompTIA does not employ negative scoring. What does that mean? You're not starting with 100 and every time you miss something, you go down. That's not how it works. Every time you get something right, you gain a point, right? So you're not doing negative scoring, right? In other words, it's best practice to, if you have a question that you don't know, just go ahead and guess. Do your best guess. Because if it's wrong, you don't lose points. You just don't gain a point. So you're always building points, right? You want to score, you want to get as high a score as you can by answering as many things right as you can. But if you answer something that's incorrect, you don't lose a point. You just don't gain a point. So have that in your head, right? You're not minusing, which means again, if you have, let's say you have 10 questions and 5 minutes left on the clock, right? Well, that's just start hitting them, and if you don't know, guess. Just guess, right? Do your best you can, right? Don't leave any question unanswered. Do not leave any question unanswered. That's bad, right? Make an educated guess, right? Um, and so there we go. You can miss several questions, still pass. Okay. So the CompTIA exams are very rigorous, right? They're rigorous exams. The way they write them is kind of strange. I consider it poorly written questions. They sometimes have double negatives. They're not using proper English, and sometimes it's just very strange. So just make sure you read the whole question, right? Another thing is preparation. If you're not scoring 85s to 95s on your practice tests, you're not ready for this exam, right? Don't forget you can actually reschedule your exam as long as you're 24 hours before your time to exam, right? So let's say this is Thursday and you're taking the test on Saturday, call Thursday and reschedule your exam. And you can't call Friday as long as you call it within 24 hours. So if your exam is Saturday at 10, you have to call before 10 on Friday to reschedule, right? But if you're not making 90s, 85s, or 90s on your practice exams, you may want to reschedule. Now, if you don't have the option of rescheduling, then start hitting those practice tests as hard as you can, right? Prepare, prepare, prepare. Practice test and then review. Practice and review over and over and over. You have to be getting, again, 85s or 90s on those practice tests. All right, and that's the rule. Okay, so there we go. All right, so that's the video on test day. Hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget to watch those videos. The links are on there. Just kind of have to read them out. You can't click on them. There's also a soft copy of this document, so search for it, and you can get those links. And I wish you all the luck in the world. You got this. You can do it. Just make sure you're prepared.